You're listening to CFRN, the Christian Financial Radio Network.
Good afternoon, traders, and welcome back to the CFRN Emini Futures Cast. This is the daily broadcast of Indeterminate Length, where we discuss all things Emini, along with some really big ideas on the finer points of trading gold, bonds, crude, sugar, the euro. Joining us today, Mr. Michael Borg. From our trading desk in Chicago, Mr. Burton Schlichter. Now, to get things started, let's go to our host and founder in Studio A, overlooking South Mountain, America's largest city park. Here's Dwayne.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Today is Tuesday, 4th day of November, 2025. They call this Turnaround Tuesday? Yeah, maybe. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Whoever you are, wherever you are, we're just glad to have you right here, right now. Michael is still out. Keep him and his family in your prayers. His uncle passed. He's up in the Northeast attending the memorial service, and of course spending time with his family, so please keep them in your prayers. Now, the live training room is open each morning, even in his absence, although he's not there to teach you, but I'm there to make a random comment here and there. So, anyway, moving on. We do 2 live broadcasts every trading day. The first live broadcast is private. That's the live training room. So to get in there, you got to be a member or taking your 1-week free trial. If you have not taken your 1-week free trial, go to mytradingiq.com. At the very top of the page, there's a big purple button, 5-day free trial. Click it, fill out the form. When Michael returns Wednesday night, he'll get your indicators up and indicating. Your trial will officially start Thursday, and it'll run all the way through next Wednesday. The weekend does not count against your 5 trading days. Now, there's no credit card required, and you're not just getting access to the live training room. That's just 2 hours out of the day. We work around the clock. From Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern to Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern. So, when you take the trial, you're getting access to everything. We treat you just like you were already a member, with access to everything from the weekly trading zones, to the logic alerts, to the concierge trade alerts, everything. We want you to be able to make a well-informed, intelligent decision at the end of your trial as to whether or not trading is right for you. We do it in such a way that it doesn't cost you a dime. As I said, there's no credit card required. Now, when the live training room ends each day at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, we do take a 30-minute break and come back for this broadcast, the noon broadcast, at 12 noon Eastern. There's 2 different ways you can join this afternoon broadcast live. The best way, only got to do it once. Go to mytradingiq.com. Scroll down the page this time to where it says noon broadcast. Click the link, fill out the 30-second registration form, and you're done. What will happen going forward is every trading day, you'll get an email about an hour before this broadcast starts. In the email, there's a link, so at 12 noon Eastern, you just click the link in the email, and it automatically logs you into our platform. The benefit there is you immediately have access to the question box, so you can ask questions and participate in the discussion. Of course, there'll be days you're out of the office, away from the desktop, but you still want to join live. And some days you'll be busy, so you can't join live, but you want to get caught up later. You can do both of those via our YouTube channel, which is easy to remember. youtube.com/CFRN. That's the Christian Financial Radio Network since 2005. But all you got to remember is youtube.com/CFRN. Not only do we broadcast live every trading day on our YouTube channel, as we're doing right now, simulcasting, but we also archive each and every daily broadcast. Currently, there's over 2,900 daily episodes archived for your educational and viewing pleasure. On the left side of the screen, you'll see our schedule for each afternoon broadcast. The bottom half, of course, won't happen because Michael's out. But we'll go ahead and dive right into our daily devotional and get started as we do each and every day. The topic we're on right now, I think we're on day 9 of 28, learning to share your faith. This is the single longest devotional on one topic we've ever had, because it really is that important. Learning to share your faith has eternal consequences. Acts 4, verses 18 through 20 is our scripture today, and I'm going to share it from the Message translation. They called them back and warned them that they were on no account ever again to speak or teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John spoke right back. Whether it's right in God's eyes to listen to you rather than to God, you decide. As for us, there's no question. We can't keep quiet about what we've seen and heard. I'm sure the magistrate was not pleased to hear that. Which leads us to today's topic, unstoppable. Early believers were unstoppable in their witness. They knew that the one who had all authority in heaven and on earth had commanded them to be his witnesses. That's Matthew 28:18. He had given them his Spirit to empower them. That's Acts 1:8. As a result, there was only one way to silence the witness of the apostles, and that was to kill them. So, fast forward a few thousand years, what stops us from being a witness? There are many reasons, but the big 5 are: 1, desire. We want something else, such as acceptance or success, more than we want to be used by God. 2, fear. We are afraid of offending someone or being rejected. Number 3, lack of know-how. We're not sure what to say or how to say it. Number 4, relational disconnectedness. We don't have or don't recognize opportunities to talk with others. And number 5, busyness. We're just too busy doing other stuff. To overcome these obstacles, we need to get honest with God. Admit what is true of us and ask him to both forgive and change us. When you don't want to do what God wants you to do, ask him to give you the want to want to. And I encourage you to prayerfully reflect on the 5 reasons we don't witness. And again, they're desire, fear, lack of know-how, relational disconnectedness, and busyness. Consider Which of these are obstacles for you? Confess them and ask God to change you. It is eternally significant. Let's pray. Lord, we ask today that you would give us the courage of Peter and John to stand firm in faith even when the world tells us to be silent. Fill us with the fire of your Spirit so we cannot help but speak of your goodness, your power, and all we have seen you do. May our words and lives boldly testify to Jesus. It's in Jesus' name we believe and pray. And everybody said, Amen. Amen and happy Tuesday. Although I suspect there's a whole lot of folks that are not happy on this Tuesday, as we get to the charts, you'll better understand, or just as I give you the numbers from around the world, you'll get the big picture. Starting here in the U.S., the cash markets, or the indices as they're called, currently the Dow's down 194 points. The Nasdaq's down 359. That's over 1.5%. S&P 500 is down 61, almost 1%. The Russell 2000 is down 22 points and falling, almost 1%. Now you get the idea, huh? In the commodity basket, crude oil is down 35 cents, trading 60.70 last. Gold is down $33.60, trading 39.80.40 last. That's a drop of almost 1%. Silver's down 49 cents, trading 47.55 last. That's a drop of just over 1%, or basically $2,500 per contract traded. In the Asian markets at the close, the Nikkei dropped 914 points. That's 1.75%. Now, yesterday, the Nikkei was up over 1,000 points. Talk about a turnaround Tuesday. Shanghai's down 16. The Hang Seng's down 205. And in the European markets, the only green on the screen is the FTSE, which was positive by 13 points. The DAX fell 186 points. The CAC dropped 42. So we had a red day in Asia. It was a mixed day for the UK just because of those 13 points from the FTSE. And it's definitely a big red Radio Tuesday here in the US of A. Well, let's take a look at the global news. New York City voters head to the polls today to choose their next mayor in a closely watched election. Communist candidate Zoran Mamdani is polling on average more than 14 points ahead of his rival, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Turnout is projected to reach nearly 2 million votes, potentially outpacing any New York City mayoral election since 1969. Early voting is already more than 4 times higher than in 2021. Mamdani, who likes to call himself a democratic socialist, is nothing but a communist from Uganda. He could care less about America or New York or the people in New York. He's only in it for the power. He's polling higher with younger voters, pledging universal child care, free bus rides, and a rent freeze on rent-stabilized apartments, which is roughly 44% of New York City rentals. If elected, the 34-year-old will be the city's first Muslim leader and tied for its second youngest mayor. Cuomo has run as a centrist with an independent campaign after losing the Democratic primary to Mondami. Republican Curtis Sliwa trails in third. Elsewhere, voters in California will decide whether to redistrict mid-decade, while Virginia and New Jersey will elect governors. What a sad day for New York City. And what are these people thinking? I mean, he's made no secret of what he's going to do. Do you really think there's such a thing as a free bus ride? Come on. And free health care? Come on. Come on, Jack. The only thing free I ever found is salvation. Period. The Trump administration said yesterday it will partially fund the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program this month amid the federal government shutdown, now tied for the longest in U.S. history. The update comes after funding for the program, colloquially known as food stamps, lapsed over the weekend. The Agriculture Department will use $4.65 billion from SNAP's approximate $5 billion contingency fund to cover half of the estimated $8 billion in monthly benefits for nearly 42 million Americans. Now, I am all for every American to receive their benefits. Sadly, in that 42 million basket, there's a whole lot of people who, number one, have no legal right to be in this country. And there are those who are in the country legally, but are obtaining these benefits illegally through fraud and deception. Roughly $450 million of the contingency fund will cover states' administrative costs, and $150 million will aid food assistance programs in Puerto Rico and the American Samoa. The partial funding excludes new applicants, disaster assistance, and any financial buffer, as the contingency funds will be depleted. Separately, the Senate recovered yesterday with no funding vote scheduled. President Donald Trump has urged Senate Republicans to eliminate the filibuster, which requires 60 votes to pass legislation. A House-passed bill previously failed to advance in the Senate 13 times. Take this to your grave. Democrats have voted 13 times to keep the government shut down. Why? Because they think that people who are in this country illegally should have all their needs taken care of by you, the hardworking American, who shows up for work every day, and every Friday or whenever you get paid, you see all those taxes that were deducted. This is what it's about. The very thing that cost them the election is now got our government shut down. Tied for the longest shutdown in history. Researchers have devised a method to produce unprecedented quantities of xanthomatin, the pigment that allows octopuses to camouflage themselves and gives monarch butterflies their vibrant wings. Xanthomatine's color-changing power could have broader applications from defense technology to sunscreen. Scientists have historically struggled to extract sufficient amounts of xanthomatine from animals or produce enough of the pigment in a lab to harness its properties. But a study published yesterday details how researchers succeeded in producing up to 1,000 times more xanthomatine than previous methods. They genetically engineered a microbe to generate 1 molecule of xanthomatine for every molecule of formic acid, a compound essential for the bacteria's growth and survival. As the microbe multiplied and required more formic acid, it simultaneously generated more of the pigment. The study's authors say the technique can be applied to produce other biochemicals, potentially offering a clean, efficient alternative to fossil fuel-based manufacturing. Imagine a soldier in battle, and he's in some desert terrain. So the camouflage he's wearing changes color to blend in with his desert surroundings. But after a long trek, he encounters a jungle. And as he steps into the jungle, the camouflage he's wearing suddenly just morphs into what looks like trees and leaves and sticks. And you follow me here? This is breakthrough stuff. Okay, turning to the markets. What do we got? U.S. stocks fell today on doubts about high-running valuations, preyed on investors sifting through the latest flurry of quarterly earnings. Wall Street is getting nervous that companies aren't performing well enough to justify their high-riding market valuations, prompting big bank CEOs to flag a likely correction ahead. Palantir shares dropped more than 6.8% despite solid quarterly results as analysts question the stock's lofty price-to-earnings ratio. Now, you know you heard it here first, because I've been preaching this for months. Skepticism is now seeping in about the staying power of this year's tech-driven rally, even as earnings come in strong. Stocks are still retreating from records after AI-heavy tech names shone in a mixed session yesterday that helped to lift the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. Before the bell, Uber posted strong results, but shares slipped, and a sign investors wanted more. Eyes are now on chipmaker AMD's report after the market closes today, with focus on its massive AI deals. Spotify and Supermicro will also report today after the bell. Meanwhile, Norway's sovereign wealth fund said it will vote against approving Tesla's CEO Elon Musk's $1 trillion pay package, marking critical opposition by one of the EV maker's biggest stakeholders. Shares fell over 3%. They're really calling for a 10% correction overall, which would put the S&P down around $6,100. I think I calculated that out this morning in the live training room. That's quite a drop. Okay. Now, this is big. Tariff watchers have had this Wednesday, tomorrow, circled on their calendars for weeks now, as the Supreme Court is set to hear arguments on the legality of the authority President Trump has used to impose the lion's share of his tariffs. These tariffs have done nothing but make America a better place. These tariffs have done nothing but clean up the mess Joe Biden left us. And yet, we have this incredible windfall, and the naysayers want to challenge it. The other countries, the ones paying the tariffs, they got no beef. They know they've gotten a free ride for so many years. They understand now that it's time for them to pay their fair share. Why would any elected official in America fight that? It's like finding a pot of gold and saying, nah, I'll pass. It's all in part because observers are split about how things will play out once deliberations begin and ahead of a decision that could come before the end of the year. So they're going to start hearing arguments tomorrow, but we won't have an answer till perhaps the end of the year. The case formerly known as Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump is one that experts in both the legal and trade space are calling a toss-up. And it's made all the more fraught by Trump's keen personal interest in the outcome and a White House public pressure campaign already in evidence. As for the projections, the odds are notable in how little confidence there is in any outcome. In a Yahoo Finance interview recently, both Raymond James, managing director, and Veda Partners, managing partner, floated coin flip level 50% odds that the Supreme Court will side with two lower courts and say the president doesn't have this authority. Why in the world would it take the Supreme Court till the end of the year to render a decision? Money's pouring into our country like never before. Foreign companies are investing in America, allowing us to build factories and give Americans good, high-paying jobs. What's wrong with these people? Wall Street chief executive said investors should brace for an equity market drop of more than 10% in the next 12 to 24 months. Now, if the 10% drop does stretch 12 to 24 months, then that won't be so bad. My concern is that it happens in a day or in a week. Corporate earnings are strong, but what's challenging are the valuations. According to Mike Gitlin, who helps oversee about $3 trillion as president and chief executive officer of investment manager Capital Group during a financial summit organized by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority today. Investor Michael Burry, of The Big Short fame, disclosed on Monday that his hedge fund, Scion Asset Management, has taken positions against tech heavyweights, NVIDIA and Palantir. Burry, who rose to fame for correctly predicting the U.S. housing market bubble and subsequent stock market crash in 2008, has taken out puts, or trades that benefit from a stock price falling. Now that takes some chutzpah to short NVIDIA and Palantir. Palantir raised its full-year revenue outlook to $4.4 billion and beat estimates for third quarter revenue. But the company's shares fell as much as 7% early today, amid questions about the stock's valuation. I told you the day was coming when everybody was going to wake up and say, oh my goodness, what have we gotten ourselves into? Shares in Nvidia, which will report earnings on November 19th, fell by more than 2% in the first hour of trading today. Palantir is now down 14%. I don't have a number in front of me on Nvidia. In an interview with CBS News on Sunday, President Trump said the U.S. would not allow Nvidia to sell its top-of-the-line chips to Chinese buyers as a matter of national security. Now, this guy who's shorting Nvidia and Palantir, Michael Burry, you probably read the book or saw the movie, The Big Short. Again, he rose to fame for predicting the 2008 financial crisis. Just in my neighborhood, houses that were selling for over 300 grand in a very short period of time were being foreclosed on and sold for 100 grand a pop. Don't think it can happen again. The stage is set. I'm no doomsday prophet. I'm just stating the obvious. The government shutdown now stands at 35 days and is tied as the longest in U.S. history as economic pain continues to mount. This past weekend was the worst yet at airports. Meanwhile, some clarity was offered yesterday on the SNAP program, which is received by roughly 1 in 8 Americans. Whether legally or illegally, 1 in 8 people in this country. But let's call it what it is, okay? iHeartMedia, which has kind of taken over the world, it seems. You don't know who iHeartMedia is. Come on, you do. Trades under the symbol IHRT. Hit their highest price in more than 2 years today, after Bloomberg News reported that Netflix was in talks to license video podcasts distributed by the radio and podcasting firm. The 17% leap in the company's stock put the company on track for its best day in more than 2 months if current levels hold through the session. Right now, they're up 96 cents, or 33%. Now, iHeartMedia is trading at $3.87. Now, see, that's a very reasonable valuation, and I'm not recommending that you buy iHeartMedia, but I don't know. At $3.85, it looks like a pretty good deal. Now remember, individual stocks can go to zero. The indices never will. The indices were designed and created to only go higher over time. Now, when we look at the indexes today, as we do every day on this broadcast, you're going to see some down days, right? But that's all part of the big picture. Over time, they always come back. 2000.com collapse, the indices came back big time. 2008 financial crisis, the indices came back big time. So, picking individual stocks, it can be a dangerous game. So, be careful. Okay. Now, partnering with a global streaming leader could push its podcast brands into the mainstream and strengthen their cultural footprint, while expanding opportunities for talent and advertisers in a fiercely competitive media landscape. Audio platforms are increasingly starting to tap into video-driven engagement trends, and the deal could position iHeart as a key player in streaming's next big battleground. Research from text-to-video platform ZebraCat in March showed that the average viewer retention for video podcast was 2.7 times higher than for audio-only formats on mobile. You know, that surprises me because when you're driving in your car, you can listen to a podcast, but you can't watch a podcast. Or at least, hopefully you don't. Netflix will seek exclusivity for select iHeart shows, according to the report, a move that would pull full episodes off Alphabet's YouTube and ramp up competition between the companies. Follows a similar deal between Netflix and Spotify last month. Under the deal, Netflix will add a slate of Spotify's most popular video podcasts to its service starting in early 2026. And iHeartMedia still up 94 cents or 32% on the session, trading $3.85. Okay. In the absence of key government data, corporate earnings are even more important. This quarter's results have taken on greater importance, offering a guidepost as investors navigate ongoing trade battles, lingering inflation, and a flagging labor market. A mid-season snapshot suggests corporates are humming along, as a glance at stock portfolios might tell you. But there's also an undercurrent of unease, as earnings commentary suggests that last season's affordability woes are still with us. Through Wednesday of last week, 81% of S&P 500 companies beat their EPS consensus, while 76% beat on sales, according to a note by a team from RBC Capital Markets, led by head of U.S. Equity Strategy Research, Lori Calvasina. We continue to think earnings are providing a solid foundation for the U.S. equity market, but earnings sentiment is still tracking a notch below what we saw in the last reporting season, suggesting the best part of the earnings story may be behind us. How bad is it? Pizza Hut could soon be up for sale. Yum Brands, Hut's parent company, said Tuesday it's conducting a formal review of options for the brand, which has struggled to compete in a crowded pizza market. Yum CEO Chris Turner said Pizza Hut has many strengths, including a global footprint and strong growth in many countries. Pizza Hut has nearly 20,000 stores in more than 100 countries, and its international sales were up 2% in the first 9 months of the year. China is its second largest market outside the U.S. I'll never forget when I got off the ship in Subic Bay in the Philippines in the late 70s, early 80s. And lo and behold, there was a Pizza Hut. I walked inside and quickly realized that this Pizza Hut, although the logo was the same, once you walked inside, you realized this wasn't Pizza Hut. This was just some guy selling pizza and figured that, hey, I can hang out the Pizza Hut logo. Who's going to touch me? Last time I was there a long time ago, he was still in business as Pizza Hut. Oil fell after a 4-day run of gains, pressured by a strong dollar and a backdrop of oversupply. West Texas Intermediate declined by as much as 1.8% to trade below $61 a barrel. A global stock rally hit a speed bump amid concerns about lofty valuations, while the dollar climbed to the highest level in over 3 months, weighing on crude. We'll be looking at the crude chart here in a few minutes. The United States today imposed sanctions on a group of bankers, financial institutions, and others accused of laundering money from cyber crime schemes. Money the Treasury Department says helped pay for North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Over the past 3 years, North Korean malware and social engineering schemes have diverted more than $3 billion, mostly in digital assets, according to the Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, noting the sum is unmatched by any other foreign bad actor. An international report documented the scope of the problem in a 138-page report published last year. North Korean state-sponsored hackers steal and launder money to fund the regime's nuclear weapons program. This don't look pretty. All right, turning from Wall Street, what else we got? AOC, I don't have to tell you who that is both radical and unqualified to be president. But, I mean, come on, New York City is about to elect a communist, so she really does have a clear path to winning the Democratic presidential nomination in 2028. Tonight, communist Zoran Mamdani will likely become the next mayor of New York City. He wants, listen to this, a rent freeze, city-owned grocery stores, and wait for it, a $30 an hour minimum wage. You heard me right, $30 an hour minimum wage. Now, where's he going to get that money from? Because Trump says he's turning off the spigot. The New Yorkers who actually have money are going to be taxed into oblivion. There is no free, unless you're talking salvation. He once expressed his support for seizing the means of production. In 2020, he wrote on Twitter, "The NYPD is racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety." He wants taxpayer-funded gender mutilation surgeries. Yeah, you heard me right. His extreme positions, though, haven't hurt him politically. Polling suggests socialism is exactly what younger liberal voters want, but he's not a socialist, he's a communist. This is what happens when public schools and colleges spend decades indoctrinating students into anti-American ideologies such as critical race theory. America's most credentialed young people don't understand basic economics. They can barely read or write. They certainly can't do math. What have they been taught? America is evil. It's not the greatest country in human history. They're ignorant of socialism's long record of failure. It's never succeeded anywhere. Why would we want that? Why would anybody want that? It's because they're misinformed. This is where Democrat leaders should have stepped in and rebuked their left flank, but they're afraid of them. Instead, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and New York Governor, I use that term loosely, Kathy Hochul endorsed him. Mamdani's rise shows Ocasio-Cortez has a clear path to the Democrats' 2028 presidential nomination if she decides to run. And oh, I hope she does. Now, I don't know if she can make it through the primaries. But if you think Kamala got a thrashing, just wait for this. Look back at the Democrats' 2020 primary process. Pete Buttigieg won in Iowa, but Senator Bernie Sanders, Vermont, was a close second. Sanders topped the field in New Hampshire. He dominated in Nevada, although former Vice President Joe Biden came in second. Thanks to decades of work and being then President Barack Obama's vice president, Biden had strong support among black voters. That powered him to victory in South Carolina. Fearing Sanders would lose to President Donald Trump, the Democratic Party establishment rallied around Biden and secured him the nomination. It's a shame what they did to this elderly man. Since 2020, Democrats haven't repudiated Sanders' socialism. They've sought to implement it. In 2021, Biden signed a stimulus bill that could have been written by a Sanders administration. It led to massive inflation, the greatest inflation in 40 years. The party has grown more radical on issues like open borders and supporting men in women's sports. Women worked so hard for so many decades to be recognized as first-class citizens. Now, look what they're doing. Any woman that votes for this garbage, please think about what you're doing before you pull that handle or punch that ticket or however it works wherever you are. All that fight for women's rights, break the glass ceiling, women should get paid the same as men, all of that's about to go out the window. Because I'm going to tell you where Mamdani comes from, Uganda. And he doesn't consider himself an American. He considers himself a Ugandan. And they don't think very highly of women there. I know because I've been there. I've spent time there. It's not pretty. It's shameful. And it's coming to a town near you. If you, the common sense Republican voter, don't get out and vote. The Virginia election season began with Democrat ticket leading, but after scandal hit Democratic Attorney General nominee Jay Jones, at least one observer predicts it could be the first split ticket outcome in the state in 20 years. Democrat gubernatorial nominee Abigail Spanberger and Jones had led in the polls since June. However, after politically charged violent text messages sent by Jones in 2022 were made public in early October, Jason Miers became the only Republican to take a steady lead. The Attorney General election initially made national headlines after Jones' past was exposed. In early October, the Richmond Times-Dispatch reported he had avoided jail time in early 22 and allegedly misled the court about fulfilling his community service hours following a reckless driving ticket for doing 116 miles an hour in a 70-mile-per-hour zone. A day later, the National Review published a report about text messages, also from 2022, that Jones sent to a Virginia Republican legislator, fantasizing about assassinating then Virginia House Speaker Todd Gilbert, and similarly threatening Gilbert's 2 young children. And they're letting this guy run for office. Before the Jones text story broke about a month ago, it would have been responsible to call Miers an underdog. Now I'd characterize it as more of a toss-up. J. Miles Coleman, the associate editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball, the University of Virginia's Center for Politics, nonpartisan newsletter on American campaigns and elections, told the Daily Signal. Coleman identified 2 groups that could swing the election: the soft Spanberger voters, who are predisposed to vote Democrat, were put off by Jones' texts, and those who view a vote for Jones as a vote against Trump. Negative partisanship is a real deal. The fact that they're even allowing him to run. Prince Andrew has been removed from the royal website. First, he got kicked out of the lodge, stripped of his titles. Now he's been removed from the royal website. Singer-songwriter Todd Snyder was arrested in Salt Lake City hospital for disorderly conduct after he was reportedly the victim of an assault. What? Snyder was arrested Sunday, police records show, while recovering at an area hospital after the alleged assault. He was on tour in Salt Lake City for his newest album, Lonesome and Then Some. According to a statement from Aimless Incorporated on behalf of Snyder, he was the victim of a violent assault outside his hotel and suffered severe injuries. Todd will be unable to perform for an undetermined amount of time. We deeply apologize for any cancellation and any inconvenience it causes, the statement continued. We appreciate your understanding as Todd receives needed medical treatment. We hope to have more information on new dates soon. The singer did leave after being told to do so by a medical professional, only to return and verbally threaten someone in the hospital, according to the report. So he gets beat up and hospitalized, and then I guess he gets angry at some hospital staffer. And so he was booked into Salt Lake County Jail on the evening of November 2nd, where he sits awaiting charges. Now, they lock him up and keep him, right? This is a guy with a job. I'm going to guess he pays his taxes. I don't know. But these other scofflaws, they commit all these crimes, and it's just a revolving door. And you know, law enforcement officials are just, they're at the end of the rope. It's like, why should I even bother to arrest this guy? Because he's going to be back on the street before I get off duty. And last is the future of fighting hunger powered by artificial intelligence. In Brooklyn, a first-of-its-kind food pantry opened recently, offering fresh and culturally sensitive, nutritious foods with dignity to families in need. The Met Council unveiled the state-of-the-art pantry warehouse, calling it America's first AI warehouse and pantry. It's 22,000 square feet or 4 basketball courts. This is the first of its kind AI-driven pantry. Yes, it's an AI-backed warehouse. We are using it to make sure the food gets to the right people in the right neighborhoods. Different communities want different foods. When you're hungry, you eat what's put in front of you. Is that harsh? We can tell you which pantries need more food and less food, which have specific needs. You know, that was one of the big complaints of the illegal immigrants in New York City, is that they weren't being served culturally sensitive food. They didn't want hamburgers. They wanted tacos or whatever. The insanity that this country is caught up in right now is, I don't know, insane. We'll go with that. Okay, on the home front, what do we got? Logic 247. That's our 24/7 around-the-clock Emini alert service. Not just E-minis, though. It's also crude, gold, and silver. We're in week 379. over the last 379 weeks, we've issued over 20,800 individual handcrafted alerts. And what we've averaged on a weekly basis is 20% or less of the alerts being stopped out, based on simple market structure and a simple process we teach all of our passport holders. Now, Valerie did the recap this morning at 6:30 a.m. Eastern. She will, of course, update it this afternoon, early evening, as she does each day. At the time she did the recap, since the market opened Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern, we've issued a total of 29 alerts this week, still waiting on the outcome of 10. Now, some of those may have been filled because, again, she did this at 6:30 a.m. Eastern. So at the time of the recap, we had 19 actionable alerts, of which 2, or 11%, would have been stopped out, again, based on simple market structure and a simple process we teach all of our passport holders. Now, the purpose of the logic alerts is to teach you how to read a chart. You're going to trade for a living, you got to be able to read a chart. It's that simple. How could you be a doctor if you couldn't read a medical journal? You couldn't. But even though I know all of you can read, can you read a chart? There are no words, no sentences, no paragraphs, and no punctuation. It's a completely different language. And the first time you ever looked at a chart, it looked like chaos. And it may still. But if you'll use the logic alerts as intended, pretty soon you won't need the logic alerts because you'll be able to read the chart yourself. Now, none of us are getting any younger. So, on my deathbed, I don't plan to be sending out Logic 247 alerts. And nobody knows when that day is except God, okay? But you have the opportunity right now, and you've had the opportunity for 379 weeks, or however long you've been a part of what we do, to learn how to read a chart. Every logic alert has an entry price, an initial target, additional targets, and a final trade to target. Whether you ever actually trade a logic alert or not doesn't matter. I mean, that's a bonus. You can do that too. But if you just bring up an alert, go to the 30-minute chart of that market, draw a horizontal line at the entry price, draw a horizontal line at the initial target, draw horizontal lines at the additional targets, and then the final trade to target is always going to be the weekly zone above on a long or the weekly zone below on a short. If you will do that repeatedly, day after day, in a couple weeks, you'll see the same thing I see. It's not magic. There's no secret. And it also doesn't mean you're going to become the perfect trader who never gets stopped out. Remember, over 20,800 individual handcrafted alerts, we've averaged on a weekly basis 20% or less being stopped out. Now, today's only Tuesday, we're sitting at 11%. I think last week we ended up with 13 or 14% stopped out. So, 379 weeks is a long time. But long before there was a Logic 247, we had our original alert service, the concierge trade alerts. Now, they're different in a lot of different ways, but for the purpose of this discussion, let me point out that they don't come out around the clock. The Logic 247 alerts can come out at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. Futures trade around the clock. We have traders around the globe. Our day session is their night session, and vice versa. But the CTAs, they don't come out around the clock. They're published as a static report shortly after the Globex Open, before the Globex Open each evening. So the Tuesday session we're in right now started last night at 6 p.m. Eastern. But all of our traders, and even our trial members, had all of these targets 5 minutes before the market opened. S&P 500, the Dow, the Russell, crude oil, the NQ, gold, and silver. And we're going to go through each one of these individual markets in a granular fashion. But first, we're going to start where we always do, with the daily chart of the ES, the bellwether, the S&P 500. Okay. Now, we were talking about this yesterday, that we still had this unclosed gap, and that the market was most likely to find support at the BBC. That's the green line. We actually spiked it all the way down to that all-important 50% fib extension. We talked about this last week and yesterday about how important that 50%, that is an important price, important area. Okay? Look at it. We came right down to the tick and nailed it today and then bounced. Okay? When we hit the BBC, number one, the pullback holds more often than it doesn't. And it typically results in a bounce. Now, we've had a little bit of a bounce today, but not much. I mean, from the low down at the 50% fib extension. So where do we close today? Do we close above or below the BBC? Price always reverts to the mean. In our case, the mean is green. We call it the BBC. Stands for bull bear cross. When price crosses below the green line, like it did back on March 4th, we're bearish and we expect lower prices. But when price crosses back above the green line and then confirms by opening and closing above the green line, we go from being bearish to bullish. Now, I said price always reverts to the mean. Pullback held, pullback held, pullback held, but then we traded through. Eventually, we'll trade through. And that's the question that's on deck today. As you can see, this pullback held, and this pullback held, and this one, and this one, and this one, this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And then we had a wild ride here. This was a 6-day pullback, but it held. Why do I say it held? Every one of these daily candles is touching the green line. You see, even if we close below the BBC today, what we need tomorrow is for a candle to open tonight below the BBC and then close tomorrow below the BBC. And just as back over here where we went from bearish to bullish, that would then send us from bullish to bearish. Now, 10% correction, I think I figured it out this morning, would put us down here about 6,100. That's still shy of the 50% retracement that I've been calling for. Okay. So, they say it's going to happen over 12 to 24 months. Okay. That won't be quite so painful if that's how it plays out. My concern is the institutional buyers just hit pause on the buy side for a long enough period of time that the market just implodes on itself. We'll see what happens. We'll see where we close today. Remember, if we close below the BBC today, then tonight we need to see the market open below the VBC, and then tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m., close below the VBC. Then we officially go from a bullish stance to a bearish stance. And that gap higher open from 2 Sundays ago, it's finally filled. And we're sitting right on top of support. Where's resistance, you ask? The black step line, the high of today, and blue and climbing, because it's directly above price. And then over here you have the all-time historic intraday high at 69.5375. And then the all-time historic closing high is right here at 69.27 and a half. See, there's a difference between the intraday high and the closing high. In fact, the day we put in the new all-time historic high, look where we closed, way down here. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Okay, the ES. All alerts are created on the 30-minute chart. Nothing magic about 30 minutes. It's just a time frame, the larger time frame I chose years ago, and I've stuck with it. Say if it's not broke, leave it alone. So I did. The vertical line you see on the chart separates today, Tuesday. This is Monday. Back here's Friday. Now these are this week's weekly trading zones. Okay. Yesterday you saw last week's zones. Because everything issued on a Sunday night is based on the previous week's zones. The new zones come out Monday morning at 6:15 a.m. Eastern. Once they're published, they're carved in stone for the entire week. They don't change in any way whatsoever. So yesterday you can see that price found support at the zone, found resistance at the zone, then it managed to get below the zone and found support just above Friday's low. And then we ended up closing the session right at the weekly zone, 68.82/83. This was the opening candle. Now we've published these zones for our members every week for almost 16 years. December 14th of next month will mark 16 years. So we opened below the BBC. Remember, we closed right at the weekly trading zone. We opened red and we headed right on down to the short target. This candle here, this was the second 30-minute candle. It opened at 68.79 and it dropped all the way to 68.54. It's about 25 points, give or take. I'm doing it in my head. You only need 2 points to get your goal for the day. If you had just traded this one candle right here, okay, because you're below the BBC, you got red and falling overhead, so the only logical thing to do is sell the market. This candle opened at 68.76, we'll call it, and dropped from 76, come on, to 62. That's 14 points in that one 30-minute candle at $50 a point per contract traded. That would have made your whole week right there in 30 minutes. It only takes 2 points to get your goal for the day. So once we hit the short target, based off yesterday's lows, we consolidated for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we dropped to the weekly zone below. We caught a little tiny bounce, not much. What's the high of this candle? 68.43 and a quarter. The zone is 41/42. So very tiny bounce. Only one of three things happens when price encounters a weekly trading zone. 70% of the time it's this, consolidation. 20% of the time, rejection. 10% of the time, the slice. That's when a 30-minute candle slices through a zone like it's not even there. When that happens and the move runs out of steam, price will typically retrace back to the zone it sliced through and then continue in the direction of the slice. So once we get through this zone, then we drop to this zone. 68.05/68.06. Now right here, this could have been a head fake. You could have thought the market was heading lower because we opened and closed below the zone, but buyers came in. And you got to scroll back a ways to find out why they came in there, but there's a reason. If you take the time, you can figure it out. Support is going to send the market looking for resistance, right? Well, right here, we basically get a double top. That sends us back down to the zone, but now we've got blue and climbing instead of red and falling. Red and falling is bearish. Blue and climbing is bullish. And so, where do we go? Right up to the weekly trading zone above. The zone published yesterday morning at 6:15 a.m. Eastern. And when the market finds resistance, what's it going to do? It's going to go look for support. When price drops to a zone, we expect support. When it rallies up to a zone, we expect resistance until proven otherwise. Okay? Now, the lowest weekly trading zone this week is right here, 66.83. We got plenty of time to get there. We're not only below the VBC, but we have red and falling overhead. There's potential support right here, 67.97, and then you got potential support here, 67.88, and then you got to scroll way back to see where you might find other support. This is the lowest zone though, and again, once they're published Monday morning, they're carved in stone. They don't change. Last week, we saw the NQ get above the highest weekly trading zone for 2 or 3 days. But by close of business on Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, the NQ was well below the highest weekly trading zone. And that's how it's been now for almost 16 years. There have been a handful of weeks that we closed above the highest zone or below the lowest zone on one of the markets. But in 16 years, it's, only been a handful of times. Make it 2 handfuls of times. Okay? We did the math the other day. Do it again. 16 times 52 equals, that's 832 weeks. So price seems kind of comfortable right here, right now. Keep in mind you got potential support here and here. And of course, we're sitting on top of support. All right, go to the YM, the Dow. The Dow yesterday found support at this weekly zone and then found resistance at this weekly zone. But we're below the VBC. So when we opened right here, this was the opening candle last night. It was a pretty short trip. we got to the target at 2300 hours, 11 p.m. Eastern. Now just one candle right here. You're below the BBC, you're below red and falling. This candle opened at 418 and put in a low at 371. That's like 50 points, almost 50 points. Call it 45. You only need 20 to get your goal for the day. So if you stayed, and now your range chart might have been telling you all kinds of different things. But when you look at it from a 30-minute viewpoint, there's never really any reason to get out of this trade, except I'll say when we hit the zone and printed a green candle, I'd have probably taken profit there if I were still in the trade. But look where it went. All the way to here. This is this week's lowest weekly zone on the Dow. Now again, it's possible we get below it during the week. And by close of business on Friday, we would expect to be, even if we get below it, at close of business on Friday, we would expect to be at or above the lowest weekly zone, in keeping with our 16-year tradition. Now you'll notice these lows here, this low here, that's a really important price, important area, and if you scroll back far enough, you can find out why. That's the beauty of being able to read a chart. Support set us up to resistance at the zone. And then we managed to get through the BBC. See, the pullback held and held and held and held until 9:30 this morning. It didn't hold. We caught a pop. Up to the zone above. That's as far as it went. And now here we are. Printing a green candle below the BBC with red and falling overhead. That would be the equivalent of one of Kamala's word salads, but in charts where there's no words. Except the ones I type on the screen, like this and this. The Russell. Okay, yesterday we came all the way down to the zone. Well, we started out yesterday at this zone, and then we dropped to the zone below and found support. That sent the market looking for resistance. Okay. Look at the horizontal line on my cursor. Then we get back below the BBC and we consolidate at the zone for an hour and a half. Then we drop to the next zone, spike it, but then close well above it. And then the next candle takes us down to the zone below, 2453/54. Pretty much to the tick. We overshot it by a little bit. 2450.70. Okay. Support will always send the market looking for resistance. And we found it on the open last night. Actually, that little green candle behind the vertical line, we had a leg and a retracement. That's how price moves. Leg, retracement. Leg, retracement. Leg, retracement. Leg, retracement. That's just how markets work. So we get below the BBC. We consolidate at the zone for an hour and a half. And then we complete the drop to the short target. And from there, we drop to the zone where we found support yesterday. And then overnight, we traded the London Open. Took us lower. And then we caught a bounce. and a retracement into blue and climbing that held. And that sent us up almost to the underside of the short target. Quite often when we trade through a short or long target, on the retracement, the underside, or if it was going the other way, the top side of the long target, the underside will often become resistance. But this market's so weak it couldn't even get there. It's bearish. So now where are we? Dropping. And where's the lowest weekly zone? It's right there. Where's your next area for potential support? Well, we're at one right now. Then you got 24.37. And then 24.33. And then you'd have to do some scrolling back to see where the next area for potential support is. BNQ. Come on. Okay, the NQ found resistance at the zone yesterday. Well, first it found support at the zone, then resistance at the zone. We spiked it, but both candles are still touching. Okay. This is Tuesday, this is Monday, this is last week. Don't even worry about that. That doesn't matter anymore because we've got new zones. These are the 2 days that matter. Support to resistance, back to support. If you're not getting the zones on your charts the second they're published each week, you're kind of missing the boat. I intentionally make sure they come out at 6:15 a.m. Eastern so you get them on your chart before Wall Street wakes up for the week. All right. So we had this big spike. We had a big green candle right before the close yesterday, and that didn't end well. Below the BBC, so on the open last night, this candle here, we're below the BBC, and we have red and falling. Okay, now this one candle just right here opened at 86 and dropped to, come on, opened at 86 and dropped to 60. That's 26 points. Let's call it 25. At $20 a point, that's $500 per contract traded in that one 30-minute candle. Then we got below the zone, traded through the target, and found some support here. And then we just kept going. We sliced through this zone and we didn't retrace back. When that happens, man, that's a heavy market. So we drop to the next zone, support. Catch a bounce, support again. This support off the 9:30 open takes us all the way up to the zone above. But notice all three candles are touching the zone, which is 25,852/53. They're all touching it. And then back down to support at the zone. Now we've got a candle here that has opened, and in 6 minutes it's going to close. Looks like we've got a candle that's going to open and close below that weekly zone. So where's the lowest weekly zone? Down here, 25,080. Today's only Tuesday. Crude oil has recovered. That article I gave you earlier was talking about this. But yesterday, look where crude found resistance at the zone. At the zone. At the zone. Where did it find support? At the zone, at the zone. Here we spiked the zone, but both candles are still touching the zone. This low right here ties right into these lows from Friday. That's just simple market structure. Sent us all the way back up to the zone. And we tried for 1, 2, 3 30-minute candles to break through. No can do. In fact, this high failed to take out this high. That's a sign of weakness. So down we come, back to this zone for support. We pull back to the BBC. The pullback holds, the market reopens, and we drop to the zone support. Price reverts to the mean or pulls back to the BBC. Consolidates at the zone as it does 70% of the time. And then continues on down to the short target. Through the short target to the zone. Okay. Now right here you had a candle that opened and closed below the zone. Right? It was red all the way down to here, closed here. That might have led you to believe that the market was headed lower. But when the step line, the black step line, see how on the way down they're running parallel? The black step line's on the left side, red and falling's on the right side. When that black step line crosses red and falling, you should expect a retracement back to the BBC. We traded through the BBC. We traded through the underside of the short target. And now we found resistance at the zone. First the zone was support, and now it's become resistance. Okay? Trade every market exactly the same. Gold. Not a bright day for the shiny metal. There's yesterday. Zone up to the zone, tried to get higher, came back to the zone, tried to get higher, came back to the zone. And we just flatlined into the close, and then the first 30-minute candle last night took us all the way down to the short target. Candle opened at 40.13 and dropped $1,600 to the target. $1,600 to the target and kept going. Now this support, we overshot this area right here. Okay, this is what I was basing that short target on, right here, where the black step line crossed red and falling, turning it to blue and climbing. Okay, that's what the short target was based on. We spiked it, and then we closed right on it. And then it was down to the zone, back up to the underside of the short target, back down to the zone, up to the BBC, back down to the zone. Then we get above the BBC, but we don't make it to the zone. Again, a sign of weakness. So we get below the BBC, we drop through this zone, we find support at this zone. That bounces up to the BBC and the zone. That's resistance times 2. Now, we got this zone at 39.44. The lowest zone for the week is down at 38.15/16. And again, today's only Tuesday. Here's silver. Silver was really volatile yesterday. Here's where we opened last night, and in the first 30-minute candle, we made it way below the target. You only need 2 pennies in silver to get your goal for the day. This thing opened at 47.88 and dropped to 47.54. Again, you only need 2 pennies to get your goal for the day. So then we consolidate along the target, resistance at the zone, support at the zone, resistance at the BBC. I mean, this is really some volatile action. And then we get this low, back up to the underside of the short target, resistance. That's what I was talking about. And then off the 9:30 open this morning on Wall Street, we took a dive, man. What was the low? 46.65. Buyers came in, drove it back up to the zone, but couldn't get through it. Now we're back below the BBC, but we do have blue and climbing. So blue and climbing could potentially take price back above the BBC. But in this market, no guarantee. One last look at the daily. Still sitting right on top of the daily BBC. To become a member, email Valerie, support@cfrn.net. Tell her you want to become a member. She'll send you the paperwork you need to get signed up. Once you become a member, she'll send you a lot of information. Create a folder in your email client and just stick everything she sends you in that folder. So when you need it, you'll know where it is. Once you become a member, you're going to have 2 hours of live training every trading day. On top of 2 hours of live daily training, you're going to get private one-on-one mentoring. No extra charge. All you got to do is ask. The strategy that we use, the indicators you own as a passport holder are fluid across all markets and all time frames. So if you've been watching this thinking, wow, I wish they did something for stocks, what we do works the same. Futures, stocks, crypto, Forex, ETFs. Price flows the same across all markets and all time frames. From support to resistance, back to support, back to resistance, over and over, again and again. It's a never-ending cycle. It's just how markets work. As a passport holder, you'll get the Logic 247 alerts around the clock so you can learn how to read the chart. You get the concierge trade alerts every night, typically 5 minutes ahead of the Globex Open. So that would be today at 5:55 p.m. Eastern, God willing. Every Monday morning, 6:15 a.m. Eastern, you get the weekly trading zones. Once they're published, they're carved in stone for the entire. And you're able to attend the Members Only Workshop every Thursday night. Everything a trader needs, all under one roof, one low price. How low? $5,000. $49.97 to be exact. Now, when you look back at the time and treasure you've spent trying to learn how to trade, that's probably a mere pittance. And here's the deal. No place you've ever been did you have around-the-clock support. 2 hours of live training every trading day. And private one-on-one mentoring at your beck and call. I assure you, I know. Nobody does the stuff we do. I'm not bragging, I'm not boasting, I'm just telling you we work hard for you. So, if you're struggling, I wish you the best. If you want to make a wise decision, email Valerie. support@cfrn.net. Okay, good word for the day. SOS prayers. In my distress, I cried to the Lord, and he heard me. Psalm 120, verse 1. The 3-digit emergency system has amazing capabilities. In most places in the world, you need only dial those three numbers to be instantly connected to a dispatcher. Although that's about to change in New York City, I'm sorry to say. On a computer screen, the dispatcher instantly sees your telephone number, your address, and the name under which the number is listed. Also listening in on the call are police, fire, and paramedics. A caller need not say anything once the call is made. Even rasping coughs and hysterical cries have brought a quick response. The dispatcher knows where the call is coming from, and help is sent immediately. Sometimes our situation is so urgent and desperate that we can't put it into words. So we send up the SOS prayer. Lord, I need your help. And help is on the way. In Isaiah 65:24 it says, "It shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer. And while they are still speaking, I will hear." Sometimes you feel the effects of something, but you don't understand the cause and you can't explain it. This is when the indwelling power of God's Spirit comes to your aid. The Holy Spirit helps us in our weaknesses. For example, we don't know what God wants us to pray for, but the Holy Spirit prays for us with groanings that cannot be expressed in words. And the Father who knows all hearts knows what the Spirit is saying. For the Spirit pleads for us believers in harmony with God's own will. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them. That is Romans 8:26. And undoubtedly one of the single most encouraging scriptures in the whole Bible. God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So when something happens that maybe in the natural don't look good, you got to ask yourself, I wonder what God's up to. Because His Word says that all things work together for the good of those who love Him and are doing what He's called them to do. So ask yourself, do you love Him? Are you doing what He's called you to do? If so, you got nothing to worry about. Because behind the scenes, He's working everything out for your good. Now that puts some of the onus on you, does it not? Yes, it does. Thanks so much for tuning in. Whoever you are, wherever you are, may God continue to richly bless you with His mercy and with His grace. And I'll see you at the bell. Well, that's odd. First time that ever happened, but now I can play the lovely outro. See you tomorrow.
Remember this, there is no greater return on investment than to see a human life changed and given hope. As always, pray hard and trade safe. Any financial information discussed on this show is simply the opinion of our host, Dwayne Reeves, his co-hosts, and guests. To learn more about trading E-mini futures or to take a 1-week free trial in our live trading room, call 1-866-928-3310. 866-928-3310. Information discussed on this radio program should not be construed as a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Always do your own due diligence and consult with a licensed securities broker or financial planner before making any investment decision.